Deum repriva, an orb of water, dust, and life suspended in the vast black of space. In the old tongue, it meant God's prize, but languages, like all organic things, can die out and be forgotten if enough time passes and no one is left to bring it to life and knowledge again. To most, Deum repriva just means Deum repriva now. To most, but not all. My given name is James, but I've been called many things over the years. My family, friends, and associates all call me Jimmy. Xenia, the capital of this dying world, has called me an outlaw. To them, I'm Jimmy the Witness. To be honest, it's a name I gave myself. I've seen things, I know things that those in charge would prefer no one sees or knows. I've taken on the burden of bearing witness of these things to the world, these hidden truths, in order to free them from the lies of the corrupt puppeteers pulling the strings from behind a curtain, orchestrating our demise. It is because of this dissent from the popular narratives that I and my small band of like-minded brothers have been branded outlaws. If sharing the truth and exposing corruption is criminal behavior, then so be it. We are outlaws, but righteous outlaws who will not bend to the evils of a world going to hell. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Today, I must focus on the task at hand. My father has given me a mission to carry out alone, and I must admit I'm not sure that the risk is worth the reward. My assignment is an obscure one. I must infiltrate the hive, Xenia itself, make my way through a city crawling with imperial guards to the royal library, where the archives are stored, and leave behind a book. You can understand, then, why I was thoroughly underwhelmed at the prospect of this endeavor when it was first presented to me. Don't misunderstand. This particular book in question is without a doubt the single most important omnibus of true historical information, with a singular message that threatens to shake our world system to its core. But that effect could only take place if its message is received. To our knowledge, the Capitol has purged every other copy of these texts under the guise of unifying the outlier districts after the years of Red. As far as they're concerned, the only known history will be their version of events, and any opinion to the contrary is possible grounds to be charged as a dissenter to the path, a thought crime punishable up to death. To hand over the last written copy of what really happened, only to have it found and burned, seems in the least to be counterproductive to our cause, and that is with no mention of risking my own life to do it. The only reason that I have agreed to take part in this otherwise foolish venture is that it was handed to me by my father, Matthias. His clear direction is all I need to hear in order to be put in motion. Not only because of our familial relationship, mind you, because there is not a man, woman, or child in the Remnant Valley who would begrudge a task he had given. This is because my father is one of the last remaining ciphers, keepers and teachers of the word, and those who are known to speak to and speak from the Creator. In other times, the ciphers were respected as the wisest among us and invited as honored guests to teach at the Capitol, in the very throne room of the emperors of the past, to the emperors and their courts. Of course, this was before various sects came out from among them. False ciphers, teaching a false word, seeming to be more politically and personally motivated for their own gain than to the fidelity of the truth. Out of those factions, the order of the priests of Xenia rose to prominence and effectively silenced true ciphers through persecution, manipulation, and death. The order soon abandoned the word altogether, though it was only ever a pseudo-spiritual veneer used to lower the guards of the faithful naives until it had served its purpose and was no longer necessary. The righteous standard of the Creator was cast aside in favor of a variable morality of the creation. The Creator himself forsaken by his prize in order to place them on his throne. The last of the faithful ciphers and those that followed them made a valiant stand against this doctrine of demons, battling the ideas and philosophies with impassioned pleas on street corners and carefully crafted articles shared across the districts. The people began to question their leaders, rejecting the teaching of the order, and the ciphers thought they may have been able to hold the line until the day the dam broke. The order began to send out agents from the capital who could spread false testimonies against the ciphers and turn the hearts of the people against them. The slanderous accusations of these agents began to discredit the ciphers in the eyes of the people as they sowed their hate and discord from district to district. It all came to a head when Stephanos, a cipher in the outlier colony of Arid, began calling people to repent of their sins against the Creator and to return to righteousness. Because of the malevolent influence of the order's agents, the people would not stand for his, what they interpreted as, hateful and divisive speech. The agents riled the people up into a bloodthirsty frenzy until they were calling for Stephanos' head. A mob, hooded and cloaked, came with torches and rope in the middle of the night to answer the call for Stephanos' life. Men drug him out into the town square and hanged him to the cheers of the homicidal crowd. But the worst was yet to come. In the hysterics, a ravenous Cretan from the mob also set fire to Stephanos' home, burning his wife and child alive. This horrific event ignited a panic across the districts as the capital blamed the ciphers for the attack, claiming their teachings were inciting violence and extremism. The ciphers and their followers were forced to flee for their lives, forming a district of their own just past the outlier colonies. The new Free District of Accordia sought to establish themselves as a governmental entity with established borders autonomous of Xenia's control and reach. They hoped that by separating themselves, they could live in relative peace, even in the wild and untamed lands beyond the colonies. Xenia, however, refused to accept Accordia as a true autonomous district, and instead saw their move as an act of treason and a declaration of war. Led by the order, Xenia raised a massive army to force Accordia to bend to their will. This was the beginning of what became known as the Years of Red. As the capital's army advanced on Accordia, the people were once again forced to flee from their homes and took refuge in the mountain caves. Tactically, this made it impossible for the capital's heavy machinery to pursue, and the Xenian army had to move forward slowly on foot. Initially, they tracked heat signatures to find where the clusters of families were hiding, but abandoned that when they repeatedly found packs of ravenous cave beasts called sizors rather than their intended targets. Some of the men of Accordia began to use the dangerous terrain to their advantage, hiding in clefts of rock or up in the trees with plasma grenades or the military-grade laser rifles they had collected from the soldiers taken by the wild. With difficulty tracking and unable to drive through with their military vehicles, the capital's army began to take on more casualties as the people of Accordia continued to grow stronger in their new surroundings. Outposts began to be set up and offensive strategies of their own were being carried out. The guerrilla-style tactics of the people of Accordia were primitive, yet highly effective against the technologically superior and numerically dwarfing Xenian military force. For 3 long years, the free people of Accordia were able to hold back the capital's army, and public opinion was beginning to shift again away from the order in favor of new leadership. It was at this time that the capital began to experience a new upheaval from within. The people were becoming fatigued with the order's war, and were beginning to see it as a personal vendetta against the ciphers who had rejected them, a war for their own pride rather than a true threat to the districts. At the same time, however, they had only heard what the capital's propaganda machine had told them about Accordia and the ciphers for years, and had no trust or affection for them either. This made way for the rise of a new political power to rise up to challenge the influence of the order. A charismatic young man named Elin started to separate himself from the crowd. He had a manner of speaking that proved his intellect, but still managed to connect with the people. He conveyed a passion to unify all of the districts once again and presented a peaceful resolution with Accordia that put the order to shame. The people were so taken that they rose in power behind him to remove the ineffectual imperial family who had been so heavily influenced by the order that they were, at this point, figureheads, and replaced them with this exciting and dynamic new personality. Upon his installation, Elin at once ceased the military advancement on Accordia and dispatched ambassadors to begin discussing terms of a peaceful unification of Accordia with the United Districts. In a show of good faith, Elin himself went to the front lines and set up a tent of meeting so that he could meet with the ciphers to come to an agreement. All of this was broadcast throughout the districts, showing the people how gracious and committed to peace their new leader was. This was the cunning of Elin on full display, showing himself giving the people exactly what they had asked for. Although they did not trust him, the ciphers felt pressured to respond. The years in the wild had sharpened their natural instincts and made them strong, but it had been a long time since they had sought the direction of the Creator. Now, in a time when they should have been quick to hear his leading, they devised their own plan of protection. The Deciphers decided to send out just half of their numbers to meet Elin at the foot of the mountain. After all, it had been years, and by then the capital would have no idea how numerous or few they were. One cipher would stay back, hidden in the mountains with the first group, while the other 6 ciphers would lead the second half to the meeting. As they arrived, the people of Accordia looked untamed and dangerous compared to the clean and smaller frames of Elin and his ambassadors. All the districts watched as Elin embraced the cipher who led the group, Macus, walking in front of his wife, who was holding their infant son. Elin examined the boy like a proud uncle and smiled for the broadcasts with all sincerity. He then led them into the tent of meeting, where the broadcast recorders were not permitted. Macus, however, wore a concealed radio transponder that allowed the people still in the mountains to hear what went on in the meeting. After the initial greetings, Elin spoke at length about how important coming to a peaceful resolution was to him and to Xenia. From there, he presented what he called the Articles for the Peaceful Surrender and Reabsorption of Accordia. From the first lines of the document, Macus and the ciphers could see the veneer of the too-good-to-be-true politician peeling away to reveal something far worse than they could have expected. As they read, they quickly realized that Elin had no intention of allowing them to be brought in as their own district, but to surrender as criminals and be pardoned by the mercy of the emperor. In order for their pardons to be released, however, they were expected to renounce the teachings and practices that had led to their revolt against the empire to begin with. He was demanding that they abandon their faith and declare allegiance to himself. Of course, these were terms that the ciphers were never expected to agree to, and in fact, they were never meant to. Macus defiantly rose to his feet and called the emperor's articles what they clearly were, a ruse to draw them out of hiding and establish his empire on their forced surrender. Elin laughed. He then signaled to an imperial guard who pulled out a laser pistol and shot Elin in the chest. There is a moment of quiet calm, that instant when you realize you had made a fatal error, but you're powerless to stop it. Then Elin, grunting in pain, slowly stood to his feet, still smiling as he opened his eyes and shouted, "Assassins! Stop them!" Before adding for the districts still watching on broadcast outside the tent, "Don't harm the children." The tent erupted with the sounds of laser pistols and screams, and as quickly as it all started, it ended with no sounds left but the crying of the children. Slowly, heroically, Elin emerged from the tent, crying, visibly wounded, and carrying the infant son of Macus in his arms, followed by his imperial guards leading the rest of the children behind him. The broadcasters rushed towards him as military medics began to tend to his wounds and pull the baby from his arms. Weeping, Elin spoke like a victim of trauma, but composed himself long enough to announce that even though it did not end as he had hoped, the years of Red were over, and the children would be brought back to the capital. "These innocent children will not be forced to pay for the sins of their misguided parents. We will take them in. Loving, Xenian parents will adopt them and raise them as their own. They will learn a better way than the bloody path of their parents here today, and they will become our own." The last remaining cipher, Matthias, along with the surviving people of what was once Accordia, retreated deeper into the mountains. With the battle lost and no longer being hunted, this remnant of what once was settled in a valley hidden between the mountains, cut off from the rest of the world. After what seemed a miraculous recovery from his wounds, Elon was now universally seen as the peacemaker, the savior of the districts. The Order of the Priests of Xenia publicly signed a similar document that had been presented to Maccus, renouncing their former god entirely and pledging full allegiance to Elon and his empire. All religious texts and documents, including historical texts passed down through the ciphers, were surrendered and burned throughout the districts. The order began producing new, sanitized historical texts that would become the new standard for education throughout the empire. New laws were instituted to protect the empire from new factions rising against them in the future by outlawing dissenting speech or practice. At the time, the districts were so taken with their new leader that such laws seemed completely unnecessary but wholly approved and supported throughout the districts. It has been 23 years now since the rise of Eland and the end of the Years of Red. Xenia remains unwavering in their support and adoration of the Emperor, but as the often overlooked outlier districts and colonies continue expansion, there have been pockets of upheaval and murmurs of discontent. Around 2 years ago, I began releasing my own broadcasts as Jimmy the Witness in order to feed these fires of unrest and capitalize on the opportunity to ignite a revolution. I've continued doing this throughout the outlier colonies, much to the dismay of my father, but he has not directed me to stop either. Now he is having me take this great risk to bring this book, the last known copy of the true history of our world, to the Imperial Library in the capital. He had to have known that I could not pass up what could be my only opportunity to hack into the capital's broadcast system and send out a little message of my own. I'll drop off the book, hightail it out of town, and just as I leave, I'll flip a switch and my masked face will be seen on every screen throughout the entirety of the districts. At least some good will come of this endeavor. I just hope my dad is right about this book. I pray to God that the right person finds it. Heaven help